Let's get started. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out. This is Connect Dynamics 365 and business application data with common data service for powerful results. The joke I usually make is someone's getting paid by the letter. That's why these slides are really big. My name's John O'Luck. I'm the Group Program Manager for the Common Data Service. And for the next 75 minutes, we're going to take you on a tour about the Common Data Service. We'll show you how we help you to bring data together. We have a couple partners that'll come on stage. We'll talk a bit about how the Common Data Service is helping them to deliver value to our joint end users. And we'll also demo some pieces of new functionality and other things that are really exciting. So without further ado, we'll get right to it. You know, you hear a lot about digital transformation, right? Satya's talked about it over the last couple of years. Every conference you see those slides. If you really boil it down and ask what is at the heart of that transformation, it's really about data, or at least we think so, right? Sharing data, enabling decisions to be made and actions to be taken for a business, right, for people. And what we want to do with the Common Data Service is help to drive smarter business. What does that really mean? Those actions people take, right, the measurements, the insights they have, those are most powerful when they're taken over complete, consistent, and correct data. The last thing you want is two different people looking at what they think are the same systems with different data, making different decisions. And so that's really what we're after here, to help you achieve that goal. The problem is, and most folks in the room have probably seen this, data is everywhere. Just so I can get a feel for who's here, how many folks consider yourself sort of an IT manager or admin for a company? Okay, how many folks here are more of the I use applications that my company has given me on a day-to-day basis? Okay, and then how many folks here have to deal with data all over the place, bringing it together so you can solve those business problems? Okay, great, because a lot of this content is going to be exactly for you. And the reality is, great, data is everywhere, and most customers need to do something about that. They need to deploy or build infrastructure and tools to bring it together. This is just an example, but probably not that far-fetched from how a lot of your companies or your customers may look like. There's an HR system somewhere. It's a system of record. That thing was deployed 15 years ago, right? And it's got data. It's got your employee records. Over somewhere else is where you run your finances, your expense. Probably deployed separately, probably owned by the finance department and not the HR people. But finance and expense reports are based off of people, right? So now you have two systems, two islands of data. And then travel systems. I mean, everyone's here. We got here via travel. Your companies probably have to do some type of travel management. Yet another system of record. I mean, you can fill in the blank. Any number of disparate systems really not talking to each other. And my background for the last couple of years was Power BI, so personally near and dear. The first real revolution we saw was people wanting to see end-to-end data, understand what their company is doing, reporting effectively, right? Let me understand what something looks like, that whole process from beginning to end. And so customers were doing this. They were building, we talked to one customer, they had an intern build PowerShell scripts to copy data onto a file share, and that thing got imported somewhere else. You did whatever you had to do, so all that information could come together for the purposes of reporting. We at Microsoft really believe that next step, that next evolution, is taking action on that data as well. And to that point, throughout the week, there was a bunch of sessions on Power Apps, right? Enabling simple, easy, quick apps to be built that can really help businesses deliver what they need. So you have these custom infrastructures people have built so they can do reporting, so they can take action, but there's a lot of problems that people often encounter. Stale data, right? I run a cron job every night, and then it dumps some information onto that share, which may or may not get picked up on the far side by someone else and imported. I'm seeing some heads shake, so it sounds like this may be resonating with you. Incomplete data. That cron job didn't grab all the data from somewhere, still dumped the file over, picked it up, and it's imported, so you're incomplete now. The last one that's usually the scariest is insecure data, right? I don't want my salary being seen by whoever over there in the reporting system has access, right? There's security, there's rules set in place. You want to make sure the right people see the right things. That's both so they're taking the right action, but also so they're not seeing things they shouldn't see. Well, let us help. Let the Common Data Service help you achieve these goals. What we strive to be is that place where your Dynamics 365 data, your business data, where your Office 365 data, your Azure Active Directory identity and employee information, all of that can come together, right? We want to be you'll hear me say this I think about 5 times, and you can count for me, the focal point for your data. The goal for us is we'll do that heavy lifting for you. As part of the Common Data Service, we have features and functionality. Lance will actually do a demo of this to help you bring that data in, right? Consolidate that. We have a data model at the heart of the Common Data Service, which we'll talk about in a second as well. So we'll help you bring that data together so you can then focus on the things that matter. Discovering insights with Power BI, building applications with Power Apps or ProDev line of business apps, automating your processes with Flow and Logic apps. Effectively, we want to do this. We will help you bring all of your data into one place, into the Common Data Service, so you're integrating once with us instead of having to do a lot more work. So this data-centric view of our mission is the first of 3 pillars. We want to be, and this is now time number 2, the focal point for your data. We'll do that heavy lifting. We have the infrastructure to help you bring that business application data in. Once the data is here, well, it's only good if you can do things with it. So we want to be a great place for you to build your apps and manage your apps. And then finally, we also do more heavy lifting to integrate with other services from around Microsoft. You bring your data into the CDS, we are doing that work to make sure other services know how to use it. You're not having to do those point-to-point integrations. You integrate with us once, we've done the rest of that work. And over time, we're going to let up more and more of these integrations with the other services from across Microsoft. Just to drill into this a little bit more, the focal point for data, if you don't use something like the Common Data Service, you are doing these point-to-point integrations with Dynamics 365 for finance and operations, yet another really long title, Dynamics 365 for sales, Azure Active Directory, Office 365. You're doing all that work. You're integrating with each of these. That's a different technology, right? A different SDK, and you have to figure all that out. Going back to that same diagram, we'll do all of that for you. We'll bring it into the Common Data Service, right? We know how, and we have. You just focus on that single point of integration, so a focal point for data. Building and managing apps, and we'll talk more about this in detail, but we want it to be super simple for you to build your applications. I won't dig too much into the Power Apps itself because there's been several other sessions that have gone in depth, so I definitely recommend you take a look at those, but we do have a low-code approach to building applications with Power Apps, right? Your rapid app deployment. We have an SDK that enables pro developers to build those line of business applications or ISVs to build applications on top of the Common Data Service. That's there. And then finally, we have a security substrate where this is where you can manage the security for the data. So everything that's using the CDS has the same security applied to it. A Power App, a line of business application, your Power BI reporting. That's that. If it's all brought here, you have your security model here. It's consistent across all uses in your enterprise. And finally, it just works. I've talked a lot about Power Apps, but also Power BI and Flow, Power BI for your reporting. How many folks here have used Power BI before? All right, love it. You guys in the back don't count. they're on my team. And Flow for process automation, right? These are just a couple of the first examples of those services that are natively integrated with the Common Data Service. We've been talking with, for example, Azure Data Factory and some of the other really large-scale services from across Microsoft. If we can provide those native integrations to you, you're not having to figure those things out. And that's that promise of it just works. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit as well. All right, just to kind of set some context now for how the Common Data Service looks. This is not technologically completely accurate. It's to help you kind of set the stage for the pieces. There is the Common Data Service. It is a service hosted in Microsoft Cloud, but built predominantly on Azure. At the core of the data service is the data model, the Common Data Model. The way we think of this is there's a bunch of entities that Microsoft has business expertise around. For example, sales, ERP. We've done work to model those, and we provide those out of the box with the Common Data Model. Those are our standard entities, if you will. Those are the ones that show up. And as you acquire other applications, and we'll talk a bit about this in a moment, but Dynamics 365 for talent, or you acquire or create and instantiate your own line of business applications, you can contribute to that data model, right? You can add or you can extend the existing standard entities. You can add your own entities. At the booth throughout the week, I actually had a couple really interesting conversations with customers that are in the healthcare industry. There are certain standards about how you define patient information. And so absolutely, those bodies exist, those standards exist. You can instantiate those here as well. You can make the data model what you need for your business. So on top of that Common Data Model, that's where the data lives. We talk in terms of entities. We have a security model, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. You can secure the database, the entities, the records, so that, going back to that thing before, you know who's seeing what. right? That's critical for any business application infrastructure. The reality is, we just GA'd last November, so by definition, almost all business data in the world does not exist yet in the Common Data Service. And to help with that, we have what we loosely call our data integrator. To call it what you will, it is effectively a framework and a component of the Common Data Service that helps you bring your data in. And Lance will actually talk more about that and do a demo in a little bit, so I won't dwell too much on it. But suffice it to say, we can obviously bring in Dynamics 365 data. We know how to talk to ourselves, and we're going to make that better over time. We can also bring in data, it's in preview now, from external systems. I think we've got about 20 or 30 right now, and definitely more to come. On top of, if you will, the Common Data Service is the app building experience. So Power Apps is a great low-code, rapid app development experience to get a lot of things built there. We have our SDK, which I talked about. That SDK is used by our own first-party applications. So Dynamics 365 for Talent is built on the Common Data Service using that SDK. The same SDK you as our customers, our partners, our ISV folk are able to use. So that's one of the design principles here. You should be able to do everything we do, and that's how we deliver on that promise. And then again, that it just works, Power BI and Flow. I can report, I can automate on that data. All these are native integrations right there. You don't have to do anything. Your data is in CDS. It's available to Power Apps, Power BI, and Flow. All right, and then so just to recap a little bit, because this is the overview section, the why. Why Common Data Service? It is about building smarter apps, like we talked about, right? Bring all your data here, integrate it, provide that holistic view so that the applications can help people take the right action. Consistency. So if all apps are using that same data model, you know that the person that's looking at that Power BI report is viewing the data that someone else is acting on. It's consistent. You don't have a different decision being made that should have been something else, and then action incorrect. Extensibility. Users, as we mentioned, can extend the data model. You can shape it to meet your needs, and that's a key part, right? It's very easy to go in and add to the existing entities, either new fields or create your own for your industry. And from an ISV point of view, there's programmatic support for that as well, so you can instantiate and deploy those in a programmatic manner. And finally, economy, and this is something that we've had a lot of conversations with customers about. We give you a bunch of these things as part of the Common Data Service. You're not having to deploy additional infrastructure for a lot of scenarios in order to get, for example, data moving in and all those types of things. So there's an economy angle as well. All right, so let's get into the focal point for data. Talk about that a little bit. At the heart of the Common Data Service, there is a common data model. I've actually covered a bunch of this before, but just to recap a little, it is that representation of data that matters to you. You're shaping that data model. Your apps are using that data model. I referred to entities that come out of the box. We've gone and done that legwork for a variety of business domains, but you can add your own. You can absolutely add your own. And there's metadata about these entities to help drive app creation experiences in Power Apps. You can define, when using account, what are the fields people should see by default in a list, in my edit, in the various types of experiences you want to build. So that's also part of the data model. And we're also adding support for more advanced business logic. If you've been playing with the data model today, you've seen sort of, there's a couple things. You can do max length on a couple and a prefix on auto numbers. We're adding more capabilities there in the coming quarters to really bulk up that data model. And again, you start with those standard entities, and you can add your own. You can make it your own. On that note, I'd actually like to invite Clausion Tucker from Adobe on stage to talk a little bit about the joint work we're doing for letting up value to customers. Welcome, Clausion.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. There. Hopefully you people can still see me. Sorry, I'm short. So can you actually, Clausion, talk a bit about why the common data model is interesting for Adobe?
Yes, I can, Jonah, but let's talk about Adobe for a moment, because if I would ask this room, how do you know Adobe? I think people would say Flash, Adobe Reader, all the stuff that people are... Yeah,
Photoshop.
Photoshop, a better thing. What isn't touched by Photoshop today?
That's right.
But if you look at how the company has evolved over time, we have a huge investment in what we call experience business.
What is the experience business? Actually, do people in the room know what the experience business is? Because can we do background on that?
Yeah,
well?
no,
Okay.
we can. So if I can advance the slide, yes. When you behave as a consumer, and this is where we go from the total IT side to the world of marketing, consumers basically on the left, if you work and interact with a brand wants from a brand to know you. that they speak with you in one particular voice. And that doesn't matter whether you reach them on a website, whether they reach you on, let's say, a mobile phone, whether you reach you on, let's say, a narrowcasting screen, that should all be the same. And you want them to surprise you. It's a whole different business problem than understanding a customer in Dynamics 365.
Sure.
At the same time, we're helping companies like you represent, or partners that you work with, to make this happen. So what is the context that a customer is in? And how do I take the designs that come out of Photoshop and our wonderful tools and deliver that as a message, and that's the experience, to the consumers?
That makes sense.
And do that actually at speed and at scale. And the last point on here speaks 100% to what you're trying to do with CDM and CDS, and that is integrate to innovate.
Great. Okay, so kind of going back to that original question now, why is and how is the CDM, the Common Data Model, interesting to Adobe?
Yeah, so if you look at where Adobe and Microsoft are now working together, I'm simplifying our two worlds. You commonly care about world of sales, field operations, employee talent, where we focus on the world of marketing. And when I speak to our customers, they are doing exactly the same as almost, I think, 75% of the people in this room raised their hand for. They're dealing with data and the analytics data that they get. What is this? Is this actually a transaction on a website? Is this actually an interaction with someone in a mobile phone? What's the right offer to be there? So we started about 1.5 years ago modeling this out, basically calling it internally the Experience Data Model,
okay.
XDM for short. And when we got in touch with Microsoft and we heard that you guys were working on a common data model, it's like, hey, how can we partner here? Because we don't know anything about field service. We don't know anything about call centers. We don't know anything about CRM. But that's information that does matter. Because if our customers contact you, they want to see whether you have been in touch with the call center about a specific problem.
It's that end-to-end view
It's
over
that,
a customer, of
sure,
what they need,
it's that
what they've
end-to-end
done.
feed, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it sounds like really what we're talking about here is we can bring to the table our expertise around our business domains, for example, sales,
Yep.
and you're able to bring yours from experience marketing, and then that joint value to customers is really the goodness, that end-to-end view. And the common data model is the way that we've presented that information so you can be integrated.
Yep.
And you're able to consume that and do the opposite with the XDM, the experience data model.
Completely correct.
Okay.
You got it.
Great. I'm glad we figured that out.
Okay, good, yeah.
So can you actually talk a bit then about a concrete scenario, like an actual customer example, to help settle that for some folks in the room?
Yes, no, and the concrete scenario is really about connected sales and marketing. And for the folks here who are dealing with data on a daily basis might think, oh shit, now even more data is going to land on my plate because it's not only the sales and sales operations
But we
stuff.
like data in this
Yeah.
room, right?
Yeah, no, so we like data, but we like good data, qualified data.
Yes,
yeah.
that's a good qualifier. Yeah.
Where we are currently working today is bringing two solutions together. One is Adobe Campaign, which you use for campaign orchestration, together with Microsoft Dynamics 365 for sales.
Yep.
And the scenario here is we've actually adopted your brands in our terminology. So we're in Contoso Manufacturing, and we have a nice 3D printer.
Who works with AdventureWorks probably, right?
Yeah. And basically, how do we reach the decision maker that's interacting with, let's say, the sales rep while the marketeer lives in his own domain?
Right.
Today, you see Excel sheets going left and right throughout the company. You see data on OneDrives, on Dropbox. And if you talk about secure, well, you know how compliance works in organizations.
Absolutely.
But put yourselves in the shoes of a consumer, and probably this is what you do every day. You go from what we call one touch point to another. You interact on the web. You are in contact with a call center. You search through a catalog. And when I engage with that person, I want to know where he has been or what he's purchased in the past.
Yep.
And this is what we call a next best offer scenario. I actually met with a customer 2 days ago that says, we have salespeople on the road, we call them on the phone, and they say, oh, I'm going to give you this promotion, where they said, yeah, but I had the other promotion recently from someone else. So how do you bring those two together? And that is basically unifying the two flows and not going into these complex information architectures, how Adobe and Microsoft solutions can work together. Let's simplify it and say, good, on the Adobe Campaign side and the Dynamics side, we can integrate those two. That is happening as we speak. We take marketing leads and bring those over. We take responses from campaign and bring those over. We take, let's say, campaign calendars and bring those over. However, a lot of this is still, I need to understand what you're doing so I can connect what we're doing. This is something we started about, I think, 6 to 9 months ago. But if I look at, let's say, the horizon on where we're going, we will be integrating more and more solutions.
That's right.
So CDM coming in and then saying a marketer can easily interact with a salesperson, can easily interact with a field person to make sure that, hey, you just signed up for a new promo on our credit card. We have it in our CRM system. I'm going to put you on a plan so that you also get our triple bonus incentive by doing the next thing.
Yep.
So that is basically what we're focusing on, alignment with sales, where there's shared customer and account profile data, shared reporting, and more important, triggered events, that you get the promotion when you need it. So the wonderful thing is this, as down the road, we want to bring this data into the common data service as well. And what our customers want is, like everyone in this room, analyze that data.
That's right.
And by doing that, I think we get Power BI for free out of the equation.
That's absolutely one of the key things here, right? It just works with Power BI, it just works with Flow, so they can take the actions and analyze that data. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you, Claesjon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonah, for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's just a little bit, tip of the iceberg, if you will, about what we're going after with Adobe. And that's an example of how any partner, any ISV, right, can gain value from that common data model. What I'd like to do now is actually hand the stage over to Lance. One of the key tenets for us is helping you to get that data in. It's infrastructure that we as the common data service provide, and Lance will do a quick tour of that, and I think a demo, actually, if his mic turns on.
And we need that because...
Power is good.
Well, that because my voice is going, so... All right, welcome everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about getting data into CDS. And how many of you have seen me on the demo floor talking about data integration? Some of you not. All right. So as Jonah has indicated, one of the big goals we have is to get data into CDS. And this kind of goes back to the larger goal that we have of why we want to get things together and bring them in by integration. So we have this larger business application platform, and the goal is to make it very easy to write business applications. And the CDS is a core part of that strategy. And we have a number of components that are out there today that are part of the business application platform that aren't really integrated yet. And a good example of that is Dynamics 365 for sales and Dynamics 365 for operations. Two kind of islands, even though they live under the same banner of Dynamics 365. So one of the first steps we took was to start a data integration project where we would make sure that we could enable our customers to be able to have those two systems talk through the CDS. We GA'd that in July of this year, and we actually made available just a couple of entities at that time. And today, actually, we have the full prospect to cash set of entities that we enable out of the box. And I'll show that to you in a little bit. Data Integrator is actually part of the Power Apps admin portal. And if you have a Dynamics 365 license, either for operations or for sales, it'll show up for you, as long as you have a P2 license as well. All right, and the next piece is that we are announcing today that we are going to be enabling Power Query as part of this overall story. So what do we do here? When we say that we make integration available, we mean that we'll move data from sales through the common data service to 365 for operations, or go the other way. The other piece of it, though, is that now with the advent of bringing in Power Query, you're able to bring in any data that Power Query can reach, which is about 75 plus data sources. In the web version of Power Query, which I'll show you in a little bit, there's about 30 or so that we currently get to today, but they're working to bring all of the desktop sources into the web. All right, so that's what we're going to, I just mentioned this. All right, so let's go to a demo. And I want to go to 7, 5, 6. It says 7. All right, so there's two ways to get your data into CDS via Power Query. So this is the Power Apps Maker portal, and you can see here the list of standard entities that Jonah was talking about. And what we've had for a while is the ability to create a new entity here. But now what we've also put in is the ability to bring data in from another source. So for instance, this is about the 30 or so data sources that I mentioned that we have available in Power Query. This will fill out in time. And I'm just going to go ahead and go to, say, for instance, OData. This is Northwind. I'll show you what this looks like over here while it does its work. This is OData head on top of Northwind, if you're familiar with that old data model that we shipped for many years before we moved to Contoso. Uh-oh. I think let's see what's going on here. Edit queries. Let's get rid of these guys. And let's try this again. I could have shown you right there. That's kind of strange. Let's try this way then. Okay, it's not liking this. Maybe it's the URL. No, that's not going to work. Sorry. Go back here. Copy this.
And Lance, while you're doing that, how many folks here have used the Get Data experience from Power BI Desktop? So Lance is referring to filling out. Our goal is to have parity of sort of data sources as the Power BI Desktop app does. So that way, if you used it before to get at your systems of record or your line of business apps, right, those are going to be that same list. It's just we have to add those over time. So I thought I'd just fill that in as Lance was going through here.
Yeah, here we go. I guess I had the wrong URL on the clipboard. Okay, so this gives you basically the query experience. Actually, this is the preview experience, and I can say OK here, and it'll load into the query experience. So this is Power Query for the web. How many of you have seen Power Query on the desktop? OK, so if you've seen that, this is Power Query in the web, and it has slightly different UI, but most of the same functionality. In time, it'll get all the same functionality. So you see merge queries here. I don't have a second table here to merge in, but reducing rows. I get the traditional filtering here with filter UI here. Managing columns. I actually select 2 columns here, and then I get the ability to, for instance, merge columns. So all of that UI that I normally have in Power Query can show up. And actually, this entity right here is one that I actually brought in via Power Query and put it into my common data model. It'll actually walk me through the process of creating the new entity in the common data service. So that is one way to bring data in. The other way to bring data in is through the data integrator. And in time, actually, the first way I just showed you, it will actually land as a project in the data integrator. And what we shipped, I mentioned earlier, I mentioned earlier that we shipped the various entities for prospect to cache, and here you can see we have sales, we have contacts, we have quotes, we have products, accounts, skip on down here a little bit, we have prospect to cash going in two directions, going from CRM to AX or from AX to CRM. And that's because you might want to author a sales order in CRM and then push it over to AX and then invoice it and have it come back, or you might want to push over a quote and then create the sales order and push it over that way. So depending on what your business needs to be. So this then here is actually a pre-production environment. Is showing basically what the data integration UI is going to look like in a couple of weeks. So if you've been following this, we've been talking about the fact that we're going to have a dashboard. So here's the dashboard. If you click on this, for instance, you can see records that have, what's going on here? That's not a good demo day, is it? Normally you can click into there and you can get the records that are at issue, and you can actually go to the actual project where things have failed. So if I look over here, for instance, if I dive in here into new demo, and I look at the execution history, you can see here that this is put on a schedule that's been running. But down here at the bottom, I have some examples of some records that failed in the past. I would be able to dive directly from that dashboard to this project here where this had failed. And I'll be able to actually rerun this project again directly. All right. So if you've not seen this before, we have scheduling here, so you can go ahead and set this thing up on a recurring schedule. This is set up currently to run every hour. That could run every minute. I don't suggest anything smaller than about every 5 minutes. And here as well, inside of the data integrator as well, we have this same UI that allows you, so on the left-hand side, we have basically the results of a query. On the right-hand side, we have essentially our standard entity. So what you're going to be able to do as part of the data integration process is you're going to be able to say, okay, I want to modify the data that's coming in from CRM or coming in from AX, and I'm going to be able to use Power Query to do it. So here it is. And again, it's the same UI that we were just looking at a few minutes ago. And this will take place, this will basically replace this middle column here where currently we can do transforms, but you won't need to do them there in the middle anymore. You'll be able to use all the power of Power Query. So that's kind of where we're going, and kind of wraps up the demo for data integration.
All right. Thank you very much, Lance.
Is it 5?
Yeah, 5. Thanks. Okay, so moving right along, that was focal point for data. We talked about the common data model. We talked about how we can get data in via this Power Query and data integrator. So you're able to create that single place for your business application data. Well, again, once it's there, we want to be a great place for you to be able to build your applications and manage them. This is where I kind of like to do different options you have for building applications slide, just to kind of lay out what the possibilities are. How many folks went to one of the Power Apps sessions earlier this week? I think there's 3 or 4 where great. So you saw some of the demos there about how to build apps. So you've seen how simple that can be, right? Going back to we do all that integration for you, Power Apps just works. The Common Data Service is just one of those connections that you can pick from Power Apps right out of the box. So you go and choose Common Data Service, you'll specify which instance of it, and then you're able to start building applications. So that's what we think of as our low-code approach to building apps. The reality is when we talk about real business apps, there are additional needs. Transactions, right? I don't want to post all these things unless these other things succeed. Those are more constraints, really, that you start to see in larger enterprise or customer deployments. And so we have an option I termed Power Apps Powered Up. Think of this as Power Apps is still absolutely a great way to go and build applications that are mobile or tablet friendly. But you want to add that logic in behind, and you can do that. With Azure Functions, you can use the Common Data Service SDK, deploy that Azure function to do that type of transaction, right? The multi-entity, the reads, writes, or whatnot, and then connect to it as a custom API in Power Apps. So that same app development experience is possible, and that complexity, that logic, is deployed as a function, and then you can connect. So that's Power Apps Powered Up. Now we kind of switch over to more of the pro dev experiences. And there's really 2 flavors, so I'll just drop them both here. Rich client applications. So we have some folks that are trying to build Xamarin apps, for example, right? Or you're trying to build and deploy a web or a SaaS service, a hosted service that uses Common Data Service data. Both of those are possible as well. They're both enabled by the Common Data Service SDK, the CDS SDK. And so those are available. The SDK is in preview right now. The slide at the very end of the session has an email address, not URL, that you can reach us at. We can get you that SDK. We're just wrapping a couple things up and hopefully getting that out in short order. But that's how you get rich client apps and web SaaS apps here. You use that SDK to connect to the Common Data Service. Won't dwell too much on the Power Apps angle because a lot of folks here have been to those sessions, but I do want to come back to two quick things. I mentioned those field groups. If you remember, I talked about the metadata on entities, those field groups. You, as a person that is modeling that data, know best how it should be used for a list view, what's interesting. You may have 150 fields on that entity. 12 are really interesting for that initial list. That type of metadata is available for you to configure in the Common Data Service, and then your users are not having to muck around and figure out which of the 12 they really want, right? So that's one of those things that Power Apps fully understands and consumes. And you actually saw some really great stuff, hopefully in some of the demos earlier this week, around lookups and relationships and sort of richness coming from the Power Apps experiences because it knows how to consume Common Data Service metadata. There's also a couple other things that we have in the Common Data Service that make that app building experience better with Power Apps. We support translation sets. So you can go and have translations based on language and market, and the Power Apps client knows how to message to us what that language needs to be, and the right labels come back up. So there's some things that the Common Data Service has. It's a better together, if you will, with Power Apps. As I mentioned, we do have a proper full pro dev app building experience. That's via the CDS SDK. It's in preview as we speak. And the goal there, and I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it in the next slide as well, you get the same capabilities, the same SDK that our own applications are using. And I mentioned, this can be used for really bulking up the Power App logic, right? Deploying that Azure function, connecting via custom API. And I mentioned, as mentioned before, Dynamics 365 for Talent. So the service that just went generally available a couple months back is built atop the Common Data Service using that same SDK. So there is no difference between what customers and partners get and what internally we use. It is the same one. We have a whole slew of applications coming over the next 6 to 9 months that are also using the SDK built on top of Common Data Service. Some examples are there's a workforce management app that's in flight right now. There's some around providing sort of richer product support, and so these are all things that are on our roadmap, on the Dynamics 365 roadmap, using that same SDK. And so we evolve alongside our partners and customers. That is the way we work. Security. Talked about how there is a security substrate. So suffice it to say, you can configure who has access to go and modify entities, because not everyone should, right? There is definitely a level of control. I saw a lot of heads just shake. A level of control so you know what that data model looks like. But there are going to be people that need that access, and you can do that. The way we think of sort of concentric circles of security, at the largest is the database. Does this person have access to the Common Data Service database, right? Next is entities. Can this person access account? Can they modify account? Can they read account? And then within there, individual records, right? So you have database, entity, records. We have a lot of asks for field level as well. The classic example is, I really don't want Lance seeing my pay, and Lance doesn't want me seeing his, right? And so a way to say, these people should not see field, but then HR should. And so those are examples of things that we are actively working on right now, field level security, and looking to get that to you as soon as we can. So security, we recognize, is a very big part. I do want to also address one question that came up at the booth a couple times over the week. That's how we can cheat. About security and bringing data in. Someone was asking, well, I have security configured already over there, whatever that line of business app or service was. Do you copy that and bring it into the Common Data Service? Right now, the way the service is built, we don't, I'll use the term sync or clone security configuration. We spent a lot of time talking with customers about this, and the reality that we landed on was a lot of times if you're bringing data from a couple different sources and gelling it together, creating a new model, the security isn't going to be the same, right? The end-to-end view of data, if you're trying to report on something, you may need more than you had in that system of record. And so that's where the security engine, the security substrate, within Common Data Service allows you to configure that security, but as of right now, we don't have this sync, this copy of security from the source system. But you can absolutely secure it here. And the other angle I wanted to mention, Our default model is don't let someone see something. So it's not a give everyone access everywhere, right? You actually incrementally add access. So when you bring that data in, it's not open season on that data. You have a chance to do that configuration. So I just want to address that here, in the security section. And so we've covered a couple different topics, and I'd actually like to invite Clay and Jay, although they're wearing the same shirt, so I don't really know who's who. I had to do that. To talk a bit about how...
Clay, I'm the one that works for you.
Oh, right! I almost left you at the airport. No,
Once or
anyways,
twice, yeah.
I want to hand it over to Clay and Jay to talk a bit about the work we've done with Dun & Bradstreet. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Jay.
Hi, everybody. My name's Clay Wesner. I'm a program manager on the CDS team. I've got Jay Vigland with me from Dun & Bradstreet. We've been working a lot over the last 6 months. Before we get started, though, it is actually Jay's birthday today. If everyone give him a round of applause.
And we'll sing at the end.
It's 25, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So what we're going to talk about, we've spent a lot of time partnering over the last 6 months. We've just had, Jono and Lance talking about all this great data that's going to be getting into CDS and, stored in one central place from all your different applications. Really where the D&B and CDS partnership comes to strength is once that data is all in there, how can we enrich it? How can we learn from it? How can we improve it and actually start leveraging that central source of data in other business processes? So before we jump in, I suppose, to the technical side, Jay, it'd be great if you could give people an overview of a bit of the D&B scenarios and how you add value to data.
Sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Dun & Bradstreet, we've been around for a little while, about 176 years. We manage 280 million global business records. So for any company that you can think of, we tie a unique ID to that, the DUNS number. And then we continue to build information out on that business. So where their current address location is, what industry they're in, credit data, credit insights, whether they're paying their bills on time, things like that. So when we start to talk about the common data service and you start to think about integrating with businesses, one of the first things you want to do is improve data quality. So you can move it around, that's great, but you also want to improve the quality of the data that you're moving. And so that's really where we've stepped in. So you can see, what are some of the things you can do? Well, we've configured essentially what we believe is the core set of content that you need in order to have some basic use cases assembled across whether it be CRM or your ERP. Notice that we actually didn't put Dynamics CRM for sales or et cetera, Dynamics 365 for sales, sorry, or ops, because with CDS, understand that they have all these different connectors and you may have a complex enterprise. You can really use our offering for anything. So you can clean up content and enrich content that's coming out of Dynamics 365 for sales, and then actually end up having that benefit another app that is perhaps Oracle, right? So a lot of flexibility, and in terms of the use cases themselves, is being able to do things like territory management. So if I understand what industry they're in, what size they are, how many employees they are, how many employees they have, that may help me define territory management. You can see some of the other, even spend validation and analytics. So because of the power of Power BI sitting on top of CDS, all the information that D&B is enriching on this company information, you can go at it with nice pictures, charts, graphs, and analytics. And we're going to be actually showing some of that we've done so far in our project.
And I think that's a really important point. The demo today, we're going to show it in D365 for sales. If you drop by the booth, that's the demo we're doing as well. But just what Lance talked about, you can bring in data leveraging Power Query. It could be Oracle. It could be another data source. The D&B optimizer for Microsoft will run, basically, once it comes into that common model, that common definition of an account or a lead, the optimizer is going to run, improve that data. The same reporting is going to be available through Power BI. So we're obviously trying to make a far more complete solution for D365 with embedded data back into those apps, but it's definitely not mandatory, and I think that's an important point.
Yeah, it should just give you an idea of what you can do. And it's been great for us from the standpoint of when we go out to market and we talk to our customers, and we obviously have our own set of APIs that people can license from us and connect one-off into each of their apps. we've kind of done all that pre-wiring for you. So we actually used Flow, built a Flow connector into our APIs, and essentially have done all the mapping of the data. We've already identified the schema definition. It's inside of CDS. So you literally turn it on with, put in a key and secret, if you will, and everything just works. And it's very straightforward, and it's extremely powerful for our customers that or prospects that have multiple systems, and they're trying to figure out how to get clean, accurate information, business information on global businesses.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, we look at the diagram that we had Jono showing earlier. Just like you could go develop your own application, and we're bringing in those different data sources into the common data service, Dun & Bradstreet have built through Flow and through their connector that integration directly into CDS. So now, regardless of where that data sources come from, it's still going to run Optimizer. We're still going to leverage Power BI, Flow, the other technologies that we've got available. And I think from your development side, it's made it far easier because you're not developing point-to-point integrations with D365 for Sales and Oracle and every single application that you might want to get.
Candidly, that was our experience in the past,
Yes.
right? So I've worked with Microsoft for a number of years, and we literally had to go to each individual product group and then try and do custom integrations and figure out how to get things to work. And so when this came along for us, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then just a statement of fact. I think our first line of code was in August, and we're launching October 23rd.
Yeah.
So literally taking a product that includes a Flow connector, Flow template, a Power BI template, integration into Dynamics 365, the entity, everything pre-connected and wired to our APIs that you literally can turn on in less than 90 days. So it's been a really good development experience from that perspective.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, and you see, I think, in part of this as well, not only since we have this business profile schema that's been defined and that houses D&B's content, then our other partners or other ISVs can actually extend that. So if they know more information about a business than we do, maybe it's specific verticalized data in the healthcare industry. You want to know how many hospital beds are at that particular hospital. We don't curate that data. Some of our data partners do. And now you can just extend the data model inside of CDS in order to reveal that information wherever you need it.
You're jumping ahead, Jay.
Sorry.
That's
All right.
next. We're going to
All
talk
right.
about,
Well,
let's do a
it's so
demo
exciting.
first. Let's
All right.
actually have a look
Okay,
at it
let's do
first.
I'll let you do the demo.
So like I said, today we're going to demo from D365 for Sales. This is to show you an example of how it can work. Even though we're going to be completely within D365 for Sales, what is preparing this up, like what's actually running the optimizer in the background and the Power BI report is actually all being powered by the Common Data Service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and create a new account. This is the sort of the example that we've chosen for the organization. This could be a lead, an opportunity, whatever you're tracking within your particular business. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and do Gorman Manufacturing, my favorite company. And all I'm going to do is put in some address details. So they're in San Francisco, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is in California, right?
Yes. Mr.
I'm
Seattle.
Australian. I don't know US geography. And all I'm going to do is go ahead and save that record. So I've given it very, very little information, basically a name and a location. But that's enough, even if I had spelt some things incorrectly or put in some partial details, for it to go off to the Dun & Bradstreet match services, find that business, give me back some confidence and information about what I have. And now look, that takes a little bit. It runs through in the background. But what I'll start showing you is once we start running that data, so for this whole CRM instance, we went and ran the optimizer. It's come back and started. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. You can start getting information back about how many duplicate records do you have, how many branch organizations do you have, or hierarchies within your own accounts. And it actually starts giving you some things like that Jay was talking about, territory information, segmentation information. But one of the ones that I'm particularly interested as a the CDS data nerd is when we start looking at like our matching quality within that information. So not only does it do the match and provide you back with the correct information, but it'll actually start giving you quality reports on the data that you have within your organization. So it can start telling you, for example, fine, the dark blue, you're getting high quality matches, but you've actually got a lot of street number information on these accounts that are wrong. So using Power BI, you can start delving into that information and not only just have the new correct information, but identify where in your master data records or in other systems, you might have to start optimizing and cleaning up that information. And like I said, we also do account segmentation, some data stewardship information. And this is a really basic set. And these reports that we're looking at right now, I think are built off 30 attributes that come back from Dun & Bradstreet out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that come back. So even from a really, really small data set, we're able to leverage that information. And basically what will happen is in D365 itself, and this is where I said sales were going a little bit further and adding some extra information, is you'll even see that Dun & Bradstreet business profile information light back up within sales as well. So even though it's CDS in the background feeding the information, what's going to happen is my system's running a tad slow, but it's going to catch back up as I'm talking. It's going to load that whole business profile record back for you. So as, you know, I mean, if I'm in sales, I'm managing my leads or my accounts, I'm not even going back into other systems to have a look at that. So you'll notice now I actually have a D&B business profile section, and I've got industry classifications, where their head office is, I've got actually validated address details, so it's now got down to street and number level for me, even though I didn't have it. And I've got information on their domestic parents and their global parents as well. So like I said, we only get about 30 attributes at the moment, but even that is sort of a huge amount of information for us to start validating our quality, segmentation, do other stuff, fun stuff like that. As I said, I stayed in 365, but what I'm going to do is show you what that is actually. Oh, if I didn't break it.
As Clay's doing that too, one of the things you mentioned is having parent information on the businesses. So because you're able to see, we maintain and manage essentially corporate family trees. So if you're working with a sales field and they're trying to figure out cross-sell, upsell, so he brought back Gorman Manufacturing, but now you could actually navigate through the tree, the family tree of Gorman Manufacturing. So you see the parent, the subsidiaries, where they're located, each different individual address. So if you started to do campaigns or sales efforts or marketing efforts, all that information comes back as well. So like I said before, it's a real rich core set of data that you can do a lot with. And then you can extend as well. So we'll be bringing out other data packets, if you think of them that way, that you'll be able to extend to tie into maybe more on the ops side. So you can look at credit reporting data on the supplier side, even the supplier risk data, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think to give you a really basic example of how this sits, down in the actual Common Data Service ourselves, we're shipping as part of the Common Data Service that business profile. So that sort of core 30 attributes that we were talking about of business data will actually be part of the common data model that Jono was talking about earlier. And that'll relate off to your accounts, vendors, leads, opportunities, any organizational information that a business profile may be relevant. And what's actually happening in the background is we're leveraging Flow, which is a tool you've hopefully heard about this week and seen down on the expo floor, which goes through and does that orchestration. So Flow is the one that as a record gets created in CDS, it goes off, does the match and append against the Dun & Bradstreet services and comes back and writes that record. What Jay was talking about earlier when he was jumping ahead was that what we also are talking to is, even within the D&B community, is starting to talk to their ISVs. So there are healthcare, you know, how many number of beds in a hospital, really, really specific information that Dun & Bradstreet themselves doesn't hold, but the DUNS number, which is that linchpin, that center point of the business profile, is used in those data sets. So the reason we've included this in the common data model and that we're really excited about this is it really gives that starting point, those first 30 attributes, for not only D&B to start introducing more data and more data packs, but then also an ISV community to come on as well. I think probably the last thing that would be worth talking about is, probably the development experience, and also yourselves are looking to still work with other ISVs and include your data in other applications through the CDS platform.
Yeah, I mean, again, apart from the fact that it's 90 days from touch code to launch code, which again is I think fast in any scenario. The flexibility that was there was great. And actually, one more story on timing. We actually did a hackathon up in Redmond, and trying to figure out, we had very little exposure to Flow. And so we're like, well, we want to see if we can get Flow communicating with our set of APIs. And I think within one day, essentially an afternoon, everything was working. And we're like, oh, Okay, great.
Ship it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That was it. So now you're starting to see more rich data around this. But we're looking into building more Power Apps that have data stewardship capability. It's very easy to add on additional components as we see fit.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the starting point for
Yeah.
what DMB is going to launch.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We're going to hand back to Jono, but thanks again, Jay, for joining us.
But
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So hopefully with that, you saw a couple things. First of all, value to you as customers of Dynamics 365 and Common Data Service, but also that as an example, right, of how as an ISV, a partner, a customer, you can leverage the Common Data Service to build your business processes. Clay and Jay mentioned the data could come from any number of systems, heterogeneous systems, but they're still providing customer records or account records or leads. That's that common data model. Your app doesn't have to care where it came from. That's part of what the platform does. You just act on it. The matching that they were describing acts on that aggregated data in a well-known shape. Okay, so switching over now, the third and final pillar, if you will, is it just works. As we talked about, and you've actually seen a couple examples, Power BI just works with the data in the Common Data Service. The reports you saw from Dun & Bradstreet, or the reports that we've been talking about throughout, the connector we ship in Power BI Desktop, it knows how to talk to our service. The way that we present this information is what we call a perspective. Think of it in the same way that the data model has metadata about which fields to show when I'm going to edit account. Perspectives are, what are the related set of entities that are interesting from a reporting point of view, right? So it's a group of entities that we have a couple that come out of the box, 4 out of the box standard entities. You can also create your own. So again, that's that get your users started capability. Metadata and configuration in the Common Data Service makes it easier for your users to consume and report on that data in the Power BI Desktop experience. And so this is in preview right now. We're hoping to get that out the door real fast for general availability. But if anyone's interested, the URL, I keep saying URL, the email address is available at the end of the deck, and we can get you lit up for Power BI integration. The thing that's interesting about this is you saw an ISV solution uses Power BI the same way your end user might want to use Power BI and look at that data, right? So the fact that it just comes out of the box, it's natively integrated, is one of those value propositions of Common Data Service. There is no better example than live things like we did with the DMB of how integration with Flow works. And you heard how quickly the Dun & Bradstreet team was able to actually create that connector for Flow, get it connected to their service. So Flow just works with the Common Data Service. It knows how to reach in, understand, query, see changes, and act on that. So Flow, another one of those out-of-the-box integrations with the Common Data Service. And in terms of managing data, what we have, if you've played around with the Power Apps portal, how many folks have used the Open in Excel capability where you actually can manipulate and manage that data and the entity? Again, you two don't count. But okay, fine, no, it's true. You do know, you have seen. But anyhow, one of the things we find is sometimes you're just wanting to see all that bulk data. You're not necessarily needing to build an app around it, you just want to view it. And so we do have an add-in for the Common Data Service that allows you to view the data that's in that entity and you manipulate. And the add-in actually helps you choose the right values, right, for a pick list or understand what the right domain is. So that is available. It's launched from the Power Apps portal. And that really is kind of a raw data editing and managing experience. We know some folks definitely have processes that require that. So that's available for you. All right, the last slide, planned slide at least, that people always ask about licensing. How do I get Common Data Service? What I'll try and do as best as possible here is methodically walk through. The columns will be the plans that are available for folks to purchase. The rows are the capabilities that are available in those plans. So capability-wise, we think of there being 4 categories of things users can do with Common Data Service. The first is building and running apps that use the Common Data Service. That's the building and running. And then there's a set of tasks that are administration, so setting security. Right? You saw in Lance's demo, in the admin portal, you can do certain things. So that's administrate CDS. That's the second category of capabilities. The Common Data Service itself does need to be created. It's a data, we call it a database. It's a lot more than that, but you need to create the CDS to use it. So that's a category of capability. And then finally, as we've talked about throughout, there is a pro-dev experience with the Common Data Service SDK. So being able to build and use and run apps on the Common Data Service. So capability 1, building and running Power Apps on the Common Data Service. If you're using Power Apps P1, Plan 1, or Plan 2, you are covered on that. I apologize. I realize the top 2 red X's should be green check marks. So Dynamics 365 plans and Office 365. So there are certain SKUs that have Power Apps capabilities included, and those do allow you to build and run. I don't know how I've never noticed that red X mistake before. Second, administering CDS. So this is anything from setting security through to modeling your entities. You need the Power Apps Plan 2 license. This is literally the one that is out there as Power Apps Plan 2. Power Apps Plan 1 does not give that to you, and the seeded licenses also do not. Creating the Common Data Service instance is the same. You need a Power Apps Plan 2. I get a question very frequently, and actually the booth all week long. Do I have to give every one of my employees a Plan 2 license to use the Common Data Service? The answer is no. You need to give those users these 2 rows, right? The people that need to create and the people that need to administrate need the Plan 2. Everyone else who's partying on Power Apps, right? You can get them a Power Apps Plan 1. That's just one point of clarification I wanted to make there. And finally, building SDK apps on the Common Data Service. Any of these licenses will actually let you use the SDK. I did, as mentioned before, it is in preview, and we can get you access to that. But being able to use that SDK doesn't require a specific license at this time. So hopefully that helps to clarify. And as we evolve our business model, you'll absolutely see these changes reflected on the web and the various licensing and pricing pages. So other than my mistake on the top 2 red X's, which I apologize for, this is the current state of what the Common Data Service business model is, if you will. So I did promise multiple times, and I'm going to say it right, the email address for the preview programs if you want to get involved. Sabine, actually in the front row here, runs our customer engagement programs, and so you'll see and hear from him. We have a Yammer group where we all of the program management team and engineering team is involved with. And so as you're developing your apps, we've actually learned a lot from these preview programs. It's been super valuable, I think. Sabine, keep me honest, 270 customers-ish striped across security, SDK, and so we've gotten some really great feedback, really great asks for functionality. This is your chance, right, to tell us what you need. And so we're looking to address those capability requests actually right now. So that's it for planned content. I do want to invite and thank, first of all, everyone that presented today. Invite you on stage, so if there are any questions, we can take those. So thank you very much for your time, folks. And please evaluate this session.